I'm Janet from Skirt Farmer Studio. Thank you for joining me today. I am the farmer's wife and blessed mama 4, and we live on a farm in the Pacific Northwest. I have been doing art for a long time, but just started sketching my sermon notes in the last year and a half. Today, I'm going to show you my supplies and a video that I have shot of my process. And in the end, I will have a challenge for you. So I use these fine line markers. I mostly use the small and the extra small, but I also use others. Here's a Sharpie. This one's a fine point, but a little bit heavier than those. Great for when you want a little heavier line. I use regular Sharpies, several different colors. The favorite one is gold. I use alcohol markers. They come in 2 points. One is a brush nib, and the other one's a chisel. These are great for sermon notes. So I use about 20-25 different colors, but usually try just to 2 or 3 colors plus gray for my sermon notes. Now a tip on these is you want to get about 3 in each color, and that way you can blend them, and it makes a really pleasing finished product. One of my favorite pens is these Jelly Roll pens. This one's a white, and I use the 10 the most, but sometimes the 5 and the 8. It also comes in gold and silver metallic. So these are great for writing over like black squares, for writing scripture, or whatever you want to use them for, adding little highlights in white, and sometimes even blotting mistakes. For a pencil, I just use a regular pencil. And for erasing those lines, I use this polymer eraser. Now in this one sketch, it is all marker, but sometimes I use watercolor. And so I just buy midline watercolors at craft stores. And then I bought this cheap set of watercolor and I dumped them out and I added my own. It makes a great travel kit. So for brushes, I just use midline brushes, not real big. So today we're going to be using my very first sermon note that I ever sketched. So usually I take about 3 pages of notes, and this time we're just going to sketch off of my actual sermon sketch. So I will post this in my thread, and I invite you to do a sermon sketch note based on this sermon note. So I thank you for joining me today and enjoy the video. Thank you. These are my typical sermon notes. I usually do about 3 pages during the sermon. And then this is the work in progress from those notes. I usually do it over maybe 5-6 days as my daily devotion. Here's some of the ideas I use for making lists. A lot of times in sermons, he'll give like takeaways or different things that you need a group of objects that are similar for a list. A truck makes the perfect vehicle for a group of points. And no problem if you run out of room, just hook up a trailer. I use this list when I have a lot of main points with some sub-points. I also like the composition it gives to my page with the light and dark stripes. The signpost is really cute for short points, where the tablet works great when you have some longer points to work together. Boxes and trash bags make another great object to use as lists. Here are some of the icons that I use for titles. I like scrolls, books, and banners. Here's an example of a title I did. It's big, bold, right in the middle. Peter made a great title on this sermon note. This was the first sermon in a series on Peter. I like to use speech bubbles and shapes and books and circles and lines and color for fillers. Here I used dark boxes to guide your eye around the sermon note. On this one, a tablet and some lines made great separators. I used all of my favorite fillers on this one. I think visual. So, magnify him, the Bible bleeds Jesus, believe in Jesus and love thy neighbor sums up God's will. All those things are literally what the words are saying in pictures. Here's a sermon he did before the election. So I just took his whole sermon and made it look like a voter's guide. So I looked up on Pinterest for what a voter's guide was and a vote pin, but then I made it to fit his sermon. I looked online to see what the earth looked like and some clouds looked like, but I used literal translation for him walking on earth, pointing to heaven, getting comfortable on earth. And then I used word association for Lot. I didn't put his wife as a pillar of salt. I put her as a salt shaker. This was my inspiration for the next sermon note. More literal translation, you spreading kindness, loving your neighbor, and gossip is like a fire. This is my hand inspiration for the next sermon note. Another visual, no one shall pluck them out of his hands. We should always stand on truth. The washer dial was the perfect object when I was looking for something to represent the sin cycle of the Israelites.